Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. A special welcome and thank you to my colleague Derek Johnson, who is our Minister of Municipal Relations, for joining me here today. Earlier this week, at the advice of our public health experts, we introduced some new public health measures that went into effect yesterday, as you know. We took these measures in order to curb the spread of the third wave of the pandemic and to allow our accelerated vaccine efforts to catch up. These measures, which are going to be in place for the next 4 weeks, are targeted to limit gatherings and close contacts in order to address increasing transmission rates that this variant, especially these variants of concern, make possible. It is our goal that by implementing these very strict measures now, we'll be able to get back to doing some of the things that we love and have missed in the coming months. Our number one priority in the face of this pandemic has been to protect our most vulnerable Manitobans and ensure our healthcare system has the capacity to care for all Manitobans, not just victims of COVID, but all Manitobans when they need that care deserve to have it. As a government, we continue to take a balanced approach to protect the personal and financial health and well-being of all Manitobans. En tant que gouvernement, nous continuons d'adopter une approche équilibrée pour protéger la santé et le bien-être personnel et financier de tous les Manitobans. We understand a full shutdown of our society and our economy has real consequences, not just to the physical and mental health of people, but to their financial health, and all these things are intertwined. And that is why we're focused on creating an environment that can, going forward, provide sustained economic growth. To do that, we have supported our businesses strongly through these challenging times that COVID has presented us all with some of the most generous support programs in the country. Throughout this pandemic, we have been, and we will continue to, work side by side with all Manitoba businesses to help them do what they do best, and they do it well. Employ Manitobans, offer goods and services to Manitobans that we depend upon and rely upon. And I think if anything good can come out of this pandemic, it's our enhanced understanding and appreciation for the challenges faced by our small business sector and for the tremendous work they do to help all of us in this province. And so today, Derek and I, Minister Johnson and I, are pleased to announce $25 million for 2 programs that will support more than 8,000 youth employment opportunities this coming summer. Et donc aujourd'hui, le ministre Johnson et moi sommes heureux d'annoncer plus de 25 millions de dollars pour 2 programmes qui appuieront plus de 8 000 possibilités d'emploi pour les jeunes cet été. The first program, the new $15 million Manitoba Youth Jobs Program, is a youth wage subsidy program that'll run from May to September of this year, and it will support more than 2,000 Manitoba businesses and organizations who will be the drivers of Manitoba's economic recovery. We'll provide meaningful employment opportunities for we anticipate 6,000 Manitoba youth. Building upon the successful Manitoba Summer Student Recovery Jobs Program and the Back to Work This Summer program, which helped create and sustain over 6,000 jobs for young Manitobans last year, the new Manitoba Youth Jobs Program will provide employers with a 50% wage subsidy for eligible employees, up to a maximum of $25,000 per employer. Additionally, the new Manitoba Youth Jobs Program gets money to businesses faster, as employers will be eligible to apply for an advance payment of up to $750 per eligible employee, up to $7,500. We know that's important for many small businesses that are somewhat cash-strapped as a consequence of the lengthy pandemic and the challenges that it's presented to our small businesses. This program also broadens the eligibility criteria to include anyone under the age of 30. Allows employers to claim employees as well who are hired as early as the start of this month. It aligns the program's eligible wage subsidy period to the employer's own pay schedule to cover full pay periods between May 1st and September 5th, and it provides a 50% wage subsidy on all regular, overtime, and statutory wages earned during the 18-week period, as opposed to a flat per-hour wage subsidy. In other words, there's more discretionary flexibility given to small businesses as to how they wish to use the wage subsidy to support the particular needs, staff needs of their particular business operation. Manitoba's youth have been hit particularly hard. We've seen nationally this is the case with very, very high youth unemployment rates. And so to have programs available for our young people is particularly important in these times. Youth unemployment rates typically in the recent months have been nearly double the rest of the population. And we're committed to supporting Manitoba youth gain valuable work experience, which they need to take advantage of future career opportunities, and this program will help us to do that. Nous nous engageons à aider les jeunes Manitobains à acquérir une expérience de travail précieuse dont ils ont besoin pour profiter des futures possibilités de carrière. Last year, our government was proud to double our investment for a total of over $10 million for our Green Team youth employment program. This year, we're pleased to be able to maintain that very significant financial commitment as well. For more on that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Derek Johnson. Over to you, Derek.
Thank you, Mr. Premier, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Our government's priority has always been about protecting Manitobans and supporting employment opportunities in our province. We have committed to youth job creation in light of COVID-19 pandemic by offering additional resources and funding to further develop our economy to help students gain valuable work experience. That is why today we're happy to announce our $10 million commitment to the Urban and Hometown Green Team program. This $10 million commitment nearly doubles the amount invested in 2019. This additional support will benefit community organizations, municipalities, and provincial parks delivering Green Team projects. For decades, the Green Team programs have provided grant funding to nonprofit organizations and municipal governments to hire youth for seasonal employment for community projects. These opportunities give Manitobans the insight to gain valuable work experience, industry knowledge, promote community involvement, and help develop our young leaders. We have received requests for a record amount of funding this year, and this investment of $10 million will be a significant expansion for the number of projects and youth that will benefit from this program. This program will see almost 700 projects that will provide organizations the ability to hire over 2,000 youth. Priorities for the 2021 summer season are focused on community-based organization and municipal governments that can offer full-time employment opportunities for youth on projects that support COVID-19 response and recovery efforts. Over the past 2 years, we have expanded this program to provide additional support during this pandemic, and this has reached twice as many organizations as it has ever before. Our government understands that the pandemic has been difficult for Manitobans, and we recognize that we need to continue to create job opportunities for our youth and support employers to keep our province moving forward. This is why we're excited to be able to announce the expanded funding for the Green Team program today, and we look forward to collaborating with our communities as we work toward rebuilding Manitoba's economy and workforce. Thank you. Back over to you, Premier.
Thanks very much, Derek. And our government remains committed, our team remains committed to delivering the right programs at the right times to help individual Manitobans and businesses through these challenging times and position them for recovery. We're seeing some growing optimism among our people here in Manitoba. Just a recent report on our business optimism numbers showing them moving upward. That's good to see. And we know that all of us are anticipating the continued efforts of our vaccine team and the progress that's being made, helping us to move into a safer reopening, a gradual, safe reopening of our economy. These programs will help to position our Manitoba business community, our small businesses in particular, to be part of that growth and that exciting recovery that many experts expect Manitoba will be among the leaders in Canada in doing. We continue to offer the most generous supports for programs to support our businesses, get them through COVID, and we continue to focus on other programs that create a climate for businesses to be able to grow in Manitoba, like cutting needless red tape and helping to reduce costs and taxes. These things will make our economy more attractive to investors and more attractive to the people who invest right here in Manitoba as well. And so we're providing programs that provide direct, accessible support as much as possible to reduce the administrative burden and hassle that often gets in the way of programs being delivered effectively, and we're seeing that with some of the federal programs as well. Budget 2021, Protecting Manitobans, Advancing Manitoba, provides $1.1 billion for this year alone for anticipated COVID-19 response, and that includes $300 million for future contingency needs, such as the business supports we're announcing today. The best thing we can do for our businesses, our healthcare system, our schools, our vulnerable communities, our loved ones is bend that COVID curve down, and I'd say also get a vaccine. And I encourage all Manitobans to get the first vaccine that's available to them, because that's how we get ourselves back to safety, and that's how we get our lives back. A lot of Manitobans struggling right now. We know there's COVID fatigue. We know that there's the fear of the unknown too, and the fear of these variants of concern. And we have a few tough weeks ahead of us. There's no doubt of that. Right now we're in a race between the variants and the vaccines, and the variants are winning, but our vaccine team is working their tail off to get those vaccines out with a lot of success. And I want to say thank you to them for all their efforts too. We need to do everything we can to change the outcome of that race. And so remember that this week is National Immunization Awareness Week, and the best COVID-19 vaccines, the first one available. And so continue to encourage, I will continue, and I know Dr. Roussin and many others in the vaccine team will do the same, encourage all Manitobans, roll up their sleeve as soon as they're eligible. I'm also really pleased to say today that we have agreement with North Dakota and the federal government to expand our essential workers cross-border vaccination initiative beyond the truckers that were initially involved and we announced last week, to include teachers and education workers in Manitoba. I want to say a special thank you to my friend Dominique LeBlanc, who is the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, for his assistance federally, for his assistance in providing us with additional information, facilitating my ability to announce this today. Program details being developed as we speak. I want to thank Governor Burgum and his team in North Dakota again sincerely for their efforts to make this available. We are working together, as we in the Red River Valley know. We share a great history together, and we've had each other's backs in times, tough times before, and I thank North Dakota for having our backs now. We're prepared to work with them and are continuing to work with them, and it's a positive and successful working relationship. So our goal here is obvious. We want to keep our schools open. Our children learn best when they're in a school, but we need that environment and that school to be as safe as possible. And as soon as possible, we need to have our staff given that vaccine. We need to have our teachers confident that they can be in a safe working environment and learning environment. And so this is the goal. We want to get these folks vaccinated as quickly as we can and as safely as we can. And we know that relative to many, many dozens of other countries in the world, we haven't got the vaccines here from the distribution system because of a lack of domestic production that we are trying to address here by our investments in Manitoba as a province to make sure that we don't ever have to have this happen again, so that we can address our vaccine needs here in Canada, here at home. And we continue to believe that although there's a surplus of demand here, there's no surplus of vaccines. And so having the ability to have the partnership with North Dakota is very valuable here. And we all understand that we have an education system that we have to protect. We all have a role to play in protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and our community. The level of caution must remain high. I remind everybody, if you've had your first shot, don't take it for granted and don't be careless, because that doesn't guarantee safety. We see enough reports of people getting COVID and giving it to others as a consequence, not of anything but assuming that they're not part of the problem. We're all part of the problem if we choose not to abide by the public health rules. And so I encourage everyone to do that. I encourage everyone to make sure that you're cautious. And we continue that level of caution and keep it high. That's how we get our lives back. Stick to the fundamentals. Limit your risks. Avoid close contact settings, crowded places, closed spaces. Wash your hands. Make sure you limit those close contacts and stay positive and be kind to each other. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Thank you, Minister Johnson. A reminder to our reporters on the line, you will have one preliminary and one follow-up question. Up first this morning, from the Winnipeg Free Press, Larry.
Premier, you've talked tough about cracking down on COVID-19 scufflaws, so why were hundreds of people at the Forks on Sunday allowed to blatantly violate pandemic restrictions? Why didn't the province shut down the protest to protect the public?
That's a great question, Larry, and it's a frustration, frankly, for I think a lot of Manitobans who are doing their absolute best to comply with the public health rules to see people go out and disrespect those rules. Just as the opposition leader did when he organized a rally, unmasked, in a crowd. These are not good examples of citizenship, obviously. I expect there'll be more tickets as a consequence of that activity that was held, and I feel very strongly that we need to do more in terms of enforcement. That's why we announced a stepping up of our enforcement earlier this week.
It was well known beforehand that the rally would occur. Couldn't the province have done more to prevent it from happening, or to shut it down once the crowd gathered, or even to arrest any of the organizers associated with it?
Larry, you're quite right in expressing a concern about enforcement, but I can't venture in, as you well know, into how that enforcement is administered. That's a police matter. I can only say I'm very concerned. That's why we've taken steps to step up our enforcement presence, the depth, the number of shoes on the ground, because I think it is important. We can't be taking this thing lightly, and we have seen a number of people doing that as recently as that rally. I don't want to have this misinterpreted as criticism of our police services. They have a difficult responsibility. We all know that. But most certainly, I share the frustration, I think, of many Manitobans when I see events like last Sunday happen. I understand there will be a number of other penalties levied. I understand there was a recording of the incident that occurred, and so I expect to see some penalties happen, but I always think the best penalty is right at the time.
From Global News, Anya.
Good morning to you both. Mr. Premier, you said on Monday, just kind of going back to what Larry was talking about, that you think enforcement is a concern and it needs to be stepped up. And you suggested things like additional enforcement in malls and big box stores and recreational events. What steps have you taken this week to increase that enforcement?
Well, those steps have been taken already, Anya, and I think you're going to see that reflected, sadly, in additional fines and tickets as a consequence of this week's activities. We stepped up these requirements for a reason. These variants they're not playing with us. They're serious, and we need to be serious about stepping up and protecting each other from them. They're faster to transmit. They're easier to transmit, apparently. And so having the number of contacts down is really critical to making sure we avoid what we're seeing happen, and frankly, in every other province across Canada. You're just seeing it, I was going to say outside the Atlantic provinces just now, but of course you're seeing a sharp increase in the Atlantic bubble. In Nova Scotia right now, Halifax is shut down. 2 weeks ago, Atlantic premiers were talking seriously about lifting the bubble. 2 weeks later, a marked increase in the number of cases means a shutdown. That's how fast these variants can act, and we have to act to limit the ability of those variants to spread now, while we're getting vaccines in arms. And that's really a critical battle that we can win. Manitobans bent the curve down. We flattened that curve and bent it down earlier in the year. Some argue better than anybody in the country. And now we need to do the same thing here in the face of the challenges that this third wave is bringing us.
All right, and switching gears just a bit, when can we expect more information on the plan to vaccinate teachers in the U.S., and how will that work?
Early next week. Those details are being ironed out. The planning for this has been underway for a bit of time now. but we now know that the isolation requirements that are normally there for people when they return from the United States will not apply. That's awfully important, of course, for educators who want to get back with their students and don't have the ability to isolate for 2 weeks. Remembering that the way this will work is that the person will go to the border, across, get a vaccine, and must come immediately back. They're not going shopping in Grand Forks. Let's be really clear about that. So this is the purpose. It's to get our schools safer and to give our educators and our staff at the schools as well a chance to get the vaccine.
From the Brandon Sun, Colin.
Good morning, Premier. Will there be any sort of effort for participants in this youth employment to get priority access to the vaccine, given that they may be in public-facing jobs?
Every safety protocol is going to be followed, Colin, but we'll leave the delivery of vaccine responsibilities to the vaccine team. It's an issue I have asked about, but I can't give you a confirmation at this point in time that if you're on the green team, you're going to get the vaccine. I won't say that because I haven't got verification. But I do understand that the safety protocols that all of us should be following are, of course, going to be really well implemented through all of our youth job opportunities.
Thank you. At this point, do you know how many Manitoba truckers have received their vaccine in North Dakota?
I got that update. I can get it for you. I see someone trying to signal to me, so we'll get that for you. But I wanted to add, for you particularly, Colin and the Brandon Sun, that Governor Burgum and I are very much on the same page on seeing if we can't have a Highway 10 access point for teacher vaccination. So it's not just at Emerson. Of course, Emerson is the 5th or 6th busiest normally in the country, but the Highway 10 access point is an ideal place. The Peace Gardens is an ideal spot if we can facilitate that. So it's not in stone yet, but I wanted you to know, and Westman residents know, we are thinking of you and we're looking to, if we can facilitate it, have a Highway 10 access point for vaccinations for educational people participating in the educational industry.
From CJOB, Schuyler.
Hi, Minister Johnson and the Premier. Thank you for your time today. I want to expand a little bit on this, expansion of the cross-border vaccination initiative. So it sounds like teachers are going to, the onus is still going to be put on them to, try to get over the border somehow. Are they going to be afforded any time off to do this? Is this something they'll have to do on their own time? And then what about teachers who, A, are unable to get there on their own means, and B, are just too far away from the border?
Well, I anticipate we're going to have lots of planning advanced very rapidly here, Schuyler. One of the things that we'll certainly be doing is getting the perspectives of my favorite union, the Manitoba Teachers Society, on this, to make sure that we can facilitate as much effective vaccine administration as possible. And so that's the goal here. As far as the variables are concerned, I anticipate, Governor Burgum and I both anticipate that we'll have the availability made on the weekends, because that would obviously reduce the necessity for people to have to take time off away from their students, and I think most teachers would prefer that access time.
Thank you for that. And, this announcement comes just hours after your favorite union called for, the reinstituting of level red in all Manitoba schools because of the inherent dangers of their job right now. I'm just wondering if you have a response to that.
Yeah, sure. This is the response. We have a great deal of concern for the safety of our students, teachers, and staff in schools. We've made every effort to make sure that by, for example, advancing available vaccines in the hotspot areas, including downtown Brandon and other areas, that we're able to, across the city, around the province, that we're able to get vaccines out faster to people such as our educational leaders. And this initiative, I hope, will be another piece of that important challenge.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Josh.
Good morning, Minister Johnson and Premier Pallister. This vaccine program with North Dakota, would it not just make more sense to ship the vaccine to super sites or other options for teachers in Manitoba to be able to stay in Manitoba to get the vaccine, as opposed to expecting teachers from Thompson or Dauphin or other locations that are far away from the border to get the vaccine? I know there's going to be more details coming out on this later, but I'm just curious why we're counting on teachers to come all the way to the border to get the vaccine as opposed to taking the vaccine to the teachers.
Well, we're taking the vaccine to teachers and everyone else through a vaccine implementation strategy that's working well, and we're going to continue to do that. This is an extra feature. I don't think most of my friends that are teachers aren't going to react to this as a hardship, Josh. You know, the chance to go and get a vaccine 50 miles away is a chance that a lot of people will want to take. And I think in particular, younger teachers who are going to have to wait longer than under the current age-based protocols than their counterparts in the school, I think will appreciate this effort very much.
Okay. And I want to go back to the questions regarding, enforcement. The stats came out yesterday that only about 10% of the fines handed out had actually been paid, and these are fines that have been going back for now more than a year when the province started issuing fines. You talked about changes earlier in the week, but how can you put teeth back into a program like this to either ensure people are paying these fines, or that they feel the need to actually pay them, or that there's more stiff consequences to violating these health orders?
Yeah, you're right on an area of concern to me, Josh. As I said to Larry before, these are issues that I think not a lot of people in the province that are doing their best, you know, to comply with the orders, and then they see somebody else not doing it or not even trying. It's offensive to them. I understand the bulk of the fines. You can check your charts. They're relatively recent, have been administered relatively recently, so there's naturally a lag in collecting on those. But nobody wants to see people trying to get away without paying, and that's the nature of some people. They try to get away without paying on parking tickets, speeding tickets, or whatever else, overdue library books. Same with this. But if we're going to make these deterrents effectively work, then we want to make sure people understand we're serious about collecting, and that's what I've communicated to our officials. So we'll expect to see some uptake on that, I hope, fairly soon.
From CBC Manitoba, Ian.
Good afternoon, Premier.
Morning, Ian.
MTS is saying that they can no longer take the government at its word that transmission in schools is rare. We are seeing double the number of cases of variants of concerns in school. Would you not concede that transmission in schools is increasing to some degree? And if so, what is the government waiting for that might mandate the move to remote learning?
We know that children learn far better in schools. Every educational study shows that. We know that most of the administrators, and included in this, I would include senior teachers with experience in the province, know that the best thing is not to have to close the schools down, and we're acting today to try to address in an additional way the safety through additional vaccines for teachers and people who work in the schools. I should emphasize not just teachers either. You know, it's folks who work in the schools. Because they, whether it's janitorial staff or it's others, administrative staff, we want to make sure those schools are safe. So we're acting on this issue because we value the ability of our schools to provide training and educational opportunities to our children, and we're going to continue to focus on that.
Thank you. Vaccine rates are quite low in southeastern Manitoba. Why do you think that is, and what can the government do to address that?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously encouraging and promoting the need for people to get vaccines, while at the same time we must remember to respect individual decision-making. That's why we've communicated through advertising, through written materials, at every press conference. As you know, I'm a broken record on saying how important this is. But, you know, we need to continue to get that message out there. I think there's a natural reluctance on the part of some people where there haven't been as many cases of COVID to think that somehow they're safe because of that. But that being said, we need to make sure that we make every effort to do the right things to keep COVID out of here. And when the variants of concern, as they continue to rise in reality, I think it makes it that much more important that we get as many as possible Manitobans vaccinated as quickly as possible.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Morning, Premier. On the vaccine hesitancy, I know you've talked in the past about looking at the idea of a vaccine passport. If people want to go to movie theaters when they open up or pro sports events, large crowd events. Is that still on the table, and is that one way that might encourage more people to get vaccinated?
It may. It's a really difficult issue. You know, the Prime Minister and a number of presidents, leaders of various countries have dismissed this out of hand. Some form of verification is an issue for discussion, obviously. We're going to see this as citizens. We're already seeing restrictions at airports, for example. I'm not sure how quickly those are going to disappear. So for anybody who wants to, visit their cousin in Calgary in the months ahead or years ahead, they're going to need to understand there's probably going to be a real benefit in getting a vaccine unless you want to drive. Another thing I'd like to see, quite frankly, I'll be blunt, basically every night now when I do have the opportunity to watch a TV broadcast, I see a needle going in somebody's arm. If you'd like to stop scaring people, stop showing the needle going into everybody's arm and the blood coming out. It doesn't really help. So just a thought. Maybe if we could just talk about the importance of vaccines rather than showing a needle going into somebody's arm, we might do a little better on convincing some people to get the vaccine.
And on the expansion of the essential worker vaccination program to teachers and childcare workers, realistically, even if you get 2 sites up and running on Highway 10 and Highway 75, what's the real capacity that can be done, given the fact that people will have to drive there, and then obviously there will be a lineup?
Yeah, well, that's to be determined by the planning, and we're energetically pursuing the planning, Steve, to get this as just one other access point. That's really all it is. I'm not trying to overplay it as the sole answer. It's just another way to help people get vaccinated. And we've got significant number of sites up around the province. We're opening more. They're going to be dealing in higher volumes. The convenience that we want to provide to people by having, a center for vaccination fairly close to them where they live is as great or greater with most of those spots than it will be driving to North Dakota. But North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum is to be thanked for making the availability of some vaccines that are just sitting there unused by the North Dakota government available to us. And his willingness to assist us is an important thing. And so I don't want to overstate it as the only solution. It is far from that. But it is a real additional source of, I think, some confidence that we can move forward a little faster. And so, we've pursued it. I know other provinces are talking about pursuing this now too. It's just another avenue. It's not the solution. It's just part of the solution.
From CTV Winnipeg, Josh.
Good morning, Premier. Josh Crabb from CTV Winnipeg. Just wanted to circle back to the schools issue, being mindful of the vaccine partnership with North Dakota and some of the answers you've already provided. Just sort of wondering if, just given the number of cases among staff and students we're seeing now and the number of contacts, it's going to get to a point where it's just too logistically challenging to keep schools open in Winnipeg to in-person learning. And if, there may have to be a switch just given the number of people who have to be isolating at home.
Yeah, so your observation's quite shared, I think, by our education minister, all of us, parents, teachers, everybody across the province. As we see the number of instances rise, then we grow in our level of concern. Today's announcement is one way to address in part that concern. We're taking many other measures as well. I would mention, Josh, that in terms of the hotspot activity, we've got 18 plus who live and work in an area like Prairie Mountain or Brandon downtown or Point Douglas North or downtown west or downtown east or Inkster east, Point Douglas south, Seven Oaks west, all those areas, teachers, educators, school staff can go right now and get a vaccine. Well, not right now if they're in front of a class, that'd be a bad idea, but later. And I think that's important to note. So the North Dakota announcement is an extra thing. It's not the only thing. I should also mention Northern Health Region, including Churchill. If you're over 18, you can get a vaccine. AstraZeneca, if you're over 40, you can go to the doctor, you can go to a pharmacy, you can get the vaccine. Super sites, if you're 50 plus, you can go to the super sites. We've got the largest capacity, I'm told, in any super site. I think there might be one other that's catching us, but we're close to being the biggest in Canada, I believe. So we have big super site capacity. Indigenous folks who are over 30 now can get a vaccine. And obviously, this is a real benefit as the vaccine team continues. And remember, we were slower at the start because we were focused on getting 2 vaccines to our seniors' homes, and we were focused on getting 2 vaccines to all our folks who work on frontline health care, and we were focused on getting those vaccines out to all our northern communities, including Indigenous communities, because they were more vulnerable. And we saw that with TV reports and TV coverage about outbreaks at Pengassi and other communities. So because we focused on those very vulnerable areas first, more than most other jurisdictions, we ended up getting broad-based vaccine availability a little later than some. In terms of age, for example, I think Saskatchewan was 5 years ahead of us at one point. So this is going to be the way it rolls out. It's rolling in the right direction. I think this is the key thing to understand as we move forward, but we need people to go and get those vaccines.
And I know you've been in discussions with the federal government on the vaccine program. I'm wondering if there's been any further discussion on a sick pay program here in Manitoba, given that we're now seeing our neighbors in Ontario looking at implementing the 3-day sick leave program. Any further discussion with the feds on working together on something?
Yeah, there has been, and they'll continue to be a little disappointed with the federal response after Premier Horgan and I and others led the charge, frankly, on pushing for a national sick leave program for this pandemic. I should be clear about that. This is for the pandemic. I see the NDP and some of their union allies advocating for a permanent national sick leave program. That we shouldn't use the pandemic to try to change the fundamental underlying social programs of the country, but that's for them to decide on how they want to proceed with that. For us, we want a sick leave program that works. The problem with the federal program, there are several. I'll just quickly go through some of them. We're having discussion later today on this. I said last week I'm not giving up on the Prime Minister yet. This is before the House of Commons. This is a budget bill, and it can be amended. And so I would like to see, and I know most premiers would like to see, a national program. We're prepared to move ahead with something that fills the gaps ourselves. We're already on the planning stages of that. We have to consult with our Labor and Business Partnership Committee. That's a requirement that we will fulfill in terms of consultation. We're not going to jump ahead without a discussion with Labor and a discussion with the business community. The Labor Management Review Committee is an important part of the process. Those discussions are already underway. But to be clear, the federal program requires a person to miss at least 50% of their scheduled work week. Now, this isn't not helpful for people who don't have to miss 50%. So clearly there's a gap there. The federal program pays just $500 a week maximum, and that money will take weeks to arrive, which isn't going to help a person who's cash strapped and going from check to check very much at all. Also, the federal program, you have to apply each week that you need it. So there's a red tape issue there that I think could be addressed. And I would also say this program does absolutely nothing for somebody who just needs to miss a shift to go and get a vaccine. And so these are gaps in the federal program. After, the Prime Minister said they're going to go ahead with a program. I would hope we could hold him to his word. We'll have a discussion later this afternoon with the Prime Minister on this issue. But I want Manitobans to know we're not sitting back here. We led the charge to get such a program in place. And now we're going to fill in gaps if need be, but I would still prefer to see a national program Lots of people in Canada shift work and move from one place to another, not as much during the pandemic as we usually do. But I think it's real important that we remove that incentive for people to go to a workspace because they're not having support when they need it. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that issue effectively. I'd rather see it done nationally because COVID is not isolated to one part of the country. It's clear it's a national problem.
Our final reporter this morning, Mr. Premier, from City News, Stephanie.
Hey, Mr. Premier. I just wanted to talk to you about specific actions taken in schools to protect teachers and students from these more transmissible variants. You mentioned that they are more contagious. They do target the younger population more. So what actions besides the North Dakota partnership and vaccinations in hotspot areas have we taken to ensure safety in schools?
Well, there's many, Stephanie. We'll get the list for you. The Education Department, Health Department can provide you with detailed lists. I'll just simply say we've been doing so many things. In terms of advertising and promotion, we've been really pushing out the message through our Ready, Safe, Grow program messaging. It's 2/3 of it's been centered almost exclusively on the safety side, repeating those safety messages. That's really important. In terms of the actual work that our school administrators have done, I commend them for that, and our teachers as well, who've been teaching during a very stressful time for them as individuals, with many of them having their own families. On top of that, then of course having the responsibility of teaching within the classroom is an added challenge, and so I thank them, and I thank the staff too, not just the teachers, but the entire staff at the school system throughout the province. This has been a monumental time of challenge for our educational delivery of our educational programs, and it's taken a real team effort, I think, to get where we are. And our students are the ones who are going to benefit as a result of that teamwork.
And part of your response to the Manitoba Teacher Society request to move into Code Red has been the vaccination efforts that are underway, but we know that it takes weeks for immunity to build, and that first shot doesn't quite get us there. So in the meantime, why not implement a circuit breaker type action in schools?
Well, again, because the first advice that we've got from our educational experts throughout the province is to have our children have a chance to stay in school. You know, there are exceptions. I can say I'm one. I took correspondence courses and so on for many years, and I found that to be a good way to learn. But for many people, it's not a good way to learn, and they need the structure of a classroom, and they need the direct contact with an educator and teacher. And I think this is particularly true, I'm told, with younger students. And so having them not in school is an interruption. So when you say circuit breaker, I can't help think, as the son of a teacher and brother of a teacher for many years, that the break might be the break in the relationship between the teacher and the student, and we don't want that to happen. I want to say thanks to everybody. I want to say thanks to Derek Johnson for his great work as our Municipal Affairs Minister and as a colleague and friend, and say to everybody, stay safe. Thank you.